Welcome back to another episode of Light Beer, Dark Money. I'm Sean Noble.
And I'm Chris Clements. And Sean, we had something really surprising and yet transformational happen this week in America.
Yes.
And that was the untimely passing and sad passing of the pirate himself, the Parrot Head, Jimmy Buffett.
Jimmy Buffett. Yeah.
And I don't know where you were, but I was actually on the beach.
Were you really?
I was actually on the beach. I was sitting in La Jolla Shores. I had just set up for our big group that we have out there every Labor Day. And it must have been 6 in the morning or maybe even 5:30. I had not looked at my phone at all, not even glanced at my phone. And I just popped it up and saw that he had passed away. And I knew that he had been sick. I knew there was something going on. He had postponed a bunch of shows after he did a show here in Phoenix. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't paying much attention to it. And this rush of emotion came over me because it felt like the first time, like I was kind of accepting the fact that I'm getting older.
Right.
And the heroes from my childhood are passing on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Jimmy Buffett, I first heard him, obviously, 1977, 7 years old, the summer of 1977. Margaritaville comes out. Star Wars is top of the box office, and Elvis passes away.
It's kind of a big deal.
And then in my, I guess post adolescence, early college years, I worked my way back around to Jimmy and listened to him just incessantly for a long time. But we have a guest today who's going to kind of put a lot of that into perspective for us.
Absolutely.
Who actually is a full-blown parrot head, knows everything there is to know about Jimmy Buffett. And that's my good friend Doug Finical, otherwise known as Fini, owns a wonderful establishment that is basically built in the vein of the Parrot Head, and that's Fini's Landing in Tucson, Arizona. And he has embodied that spirit of Jimmy Buffett for as long as I can remember. And he was gracious enough to join us today to offer some remembrances and talk about, Jimmy the poet, Jimmy the musician, Jimmy the entrepreneur, and how that's inspired him in his life. So, Fini, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely, boys. How are you?
Great.
We're doing good. And I'm sure this week has been, kind of bittersweet for you as well. You shared with me some...
Yeah. It was
just some things you knew.
I did. I saw 4 shows this year, and even before we started, my compadre and I started calling them the Final Four. And it wasn't just that we knew that there was something going on because I had heard from some friends, musicians in Key West, that he'd had a little bout with something, and it looked like that he had licked it. And but just being at the shows and seeing sort of as many shows as I've seen, it was not that there was something visibly that he was ill, but he was missing some lyrics. And, I had to realize that I started seeing him when he was 36, and now he's 76. And, it's not going to be the same. But after he had the fall in Australia, I just noticed little things of, people helping him up and down the stairs of the stage and missing the odd lyric here and there. Probably not anything that most people would even have picked up on. But for me, it was personally just a little sad because it did sort of bring up this whole idea of, there's more sand in the bottom of the hourglass.
Yeah. Yeah. We're reaching that stage of life where the days ahead are less or, shorter than the days behind. And,
right.
And just looking back at that legacy of Jimmy and what he brought to the music industry, what he brought to, the poetry of the music industry. I saw. Go ahead.
The strange truth that it happened to be, Labor Day weekend, and a lot of people made the reference to his first hit come Monday, and he says, heading out to San Francisco for the Labor Day weekend show.
I got my hush puppies on. I guess
yeah. So it was a tough weekend. I got a text from a guy named Scott Kirby who plays in a band with Peter Mayer and Roger Guth, who are the Coral Reefers when Jimmy wasn't wasn't touring, he was playing with them. And he's played at our place for 15 years. So we struck up a friendship. And he just had this very simple, poignant text that just said, it was a slow, long, tough day on Saturday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I was moved to tears sitting in this chair, watching the waves come in La Jolla Shores, seeing that announcement, and then going online and then watching all these salutes and remembrances of him.
Yeah.
And normally, when a pop star, country star, rock star, whatever passes, you've got all the people remember them for the good things that they do, but then you've got, the dark side of life for that individual. And there is none of that with regard to Jimmy Buffett. It is all just unabbreviated, pronounced praise for the person he was as a husband, married over 40 years, the same woman, as a father, as a friend, as a musician, as an icon, as a businessman. People are giving him all these great praises. What an honorable, decent businessman he was. And, he built this a little empire just on the basis of this lifestyle, which you yourself, Fini, have sort of capitalized on with Fini's Landing.
True. I've been on sort of a news fast since this all happened, because I wasn't really ready for the barrage of the CNN packages and all the stuff that goes along with it. But when you say he had a little business empire, he was worth close to $1 billion, Margaritaville Holdings, when he passed, and in a large part, he understood the value of licensing, and he didn't create a lot of these things, but he had so many people had been caught up in his idea of a lifestyle artist, which in the beginning was very difficult for him because they didn't know where to put him in the record stores.
Yeah,
they didn't know in the slots. Was it going to be country? Was it going to be rock? He always thought of himself as a folk artist, but he had all this great New Orleans blues background. So it was kind of tricky. And once he sort of tapped in on that, but I don't ever consider that of him as something, of selling out, because he wasn't really selling the lifestyle. He was sort of leasing it to us at, in 3-minute segments at a time. And I think everybody wanted him to live the high life that we all tried to live, on a long weekend or everybody had their own place to go. Ours happened to be down in Mexico. And, in the early 80s, when I first sort of got in, it was all in. And after college, what I consider the best decade of my life, I didn't have a whole lot of vocational marketable skills other than the ones that were closely related to Buffett and his music. So I knew a lot about bars. I was making T-shirts. It seemed like this sort of national, extension to embrace that and hopefully capture in a little part the idea that maybe I could possibly live this lifestyle.
Yeah, and your bar, restaurant, whatever, has become kind of a Tucson institution now.
Yeah, we have 2 now and building a 3rd, and it's all based on the island escapist. It's from the Keys, the Caribbean, Mexico, Southern California fusion, really.
That's incredible. So tell us a little bit about the 3rd venture. But tell us about them in total.
I guess I've always been a little bit of a obsessive, but other than the beach thing, there was also I got into tiki pretty heavy about 15, 18 years ago, and so became sort of an obsessive completist when it came to tiki mugs, and now building a bar down here that will be a purist tiki bar dedicated to the history of the tiki mug, and we're shooting a little documentary, and I'll have my my collection of about 1,300 mugs in there, as well as some really pure Polynesian pop stuff. So, there's a trailer out there, a 72-minute documentary film about tiki, and but here again, Jimmy had had a tiki. He had a whole tour, the Tiki Time tour, dedicated to tiki. So I guess it's not that much of a jump, but it's all in the same vein. You know, it was the I being the black sheep by default in my family, I had to sort of do an end run around establishment anyway. So.
But we've known each other for like 40 years. I mean, your sister taught me how to swim.
Yep. And I remember she talked about teaching you how to dive off the high dive.
Yes, dive. She made me dive into the water more than anybody else in the history of my life, just off the blocks, and taught me how to properly dive off those blocks. And I remember those days completely. And then you worked for my dad for forever.
I went to work. It was actually your father that was the final word in hiring me in 1984, and taught me a lot. And you know, again, it was a lot about marketing. I was working in marketing and as a graphic artist. And you know, our fathers knew each other. My father designed a warehouse for your father, so it was we really do go way back. And it's been too long, and I'm sorry that it has to be you know, a semi-somber, although I'm trying to throw the best spin on this because it's really unfathomable how much, you know, that the outcry of once Jimmy had passed about how many people he touched and how many people created bonds with other people through experiences that were brought on by him. So it really was the soundtrack of mine and many other people's lives. I mean, millions.
Yeah. Yeah, and the remembrances, like I said before, that are coming through are unbelievable, and from all walks. But I want to read one thing really quick, and talk about a tribute. This is something that Paul McCartney wrote on his Instagram page the other day. So you've got someone who's one of the greatest artists of all time, Jimmy Buffett, passing, and then arguably the two other greatest artists, complete goats, Paul McCartney, and then I saw a nice tribute from Brian Wilson. You know, put some great words up, but Paul's was really poignant. He says he had posted a number of things, but he said last but not least is his songwriting and vocal ability. If someone made an interesting remark, he repeated it in his gorgeous Louisiana drawl and said, "That's a good idea for a song." Most times, it didn't take too long for that song to appear. I was very happy to have played on one of his latest songs called "My Gummy Just Kicked In." Which you can only imagine what that song's about.
Always tropical and always topical.
Yes. We had a real fun session, and he played me some of his new songs. So for those who don't know, Jimmy's actually has a new album coming out this fall that hopefully will be mastered and released. One in particular I loved was the song "Bubbles Up." And I told him that not only was the song great, but the vocal was probably the best I've heard him sing ever. He turned a diving phrase that is used to train people underwater into a metaphor for life when you're confused and don't know where you are, just to follow the bubbles. They'll take you up to the surface and straighten you out right away. So that song was actually released on the Margaritaville channel over the weekend, and it's just blown up all over the place. And it's a song really about undying faith in the Lord and turning to the light and to the bubbles up when your life has taken a different turn. And it's an amazing song. And so even in his passing and knowing that, he probably knew obviously he knew his days were probably numbered and slowing, and he wrote some songs that we can really dive into and remember him by.
Yeah.
So Jimmy was an altar boy, you know, and from a Catholic education, some of his first songs were him really breaking out of that. And you know, grapefruit, juicy fruit talks about you know, the idea of mortal sin, and he was always, although, you know, I think he strayed a little bit from formal religion, he really had a deep faith in something greater than us all, and really tried to tap into that with his music. You mentioned that about that Paul talked about his musicianship. You know, a lot of people try to sort of just use the word escapism to kind of sum up what his thing, and I think that's a little pat. It's much deeper than that. He was a storyteller in the true sense of Tennessee Williams, Mark Twain, his idols, the Southern writers, and of course he was a very accomplished bestseller author himself. And so it's a little easy to sort of quantify him in the Margaritaville or Cheeseburger in Paradise or Volcano or what people call the Big Eight that he would play at every show. But if you get in there, there's an extremely deep catalog, and some people that went way back before Margaritaville to what sort of some true purists, and I consider myself one, feel the seminal albums which were the ones that were sort of pre-changes in latitudes and before Margaritaville and before the great marketing machine kicked in.
Yeah, I mean, when you consider him as a lyricist, even Bob Dylan said that one of his favorite songs was "He Went to Paris." It says one of the most well-written songs ever. And I've taken some time over the last several days since that and dove right into some of these old lyrics and even something as silly as a song like "Pencil Thin Mustache" has some of the best lyrics you'll find in any sort of pop song. When he says, but then it's flat top, dirty bop, copping a feel, grubbing on the living room floor. They'll send you off to college to try to gain a little knowledge when all you want to do is learn how to score. I mean, not only is that a great play on words and great sort of, situational poetry, but it's just so true about just life that we're living. And then something
asked him how he could write such beautiful ballads and then write some really trashy songs, like when he wrote, "Why don't we get drunk and screw?" Pardon me, bleep me out there. But and he said, "Well, I can feel real deep and very sensitive sometimes, and really trashy on other occasions."
Well, I mean, and what's embodied with that is "A Pirate Looks at 40," which has been played over and over again over the last several days.
Always.
Just
always my personal anthem. Yeah, my favorite song of his. Yeah, and he was often quoted as saying the song that he was the most proud of, even late in his career, was "A Pirate Looks at 40."
Well, I mean, when you have Dave Matthews playing it almost every night and Jack Johnson playing it almost every night, that you've got something. And they played it over the weekend. There's a lot of video of that. So it's a tremendous legacy, and and the irony of the way he passed can't be understated in some ways. I mean, he died of a very aggressive and rare form of skin cancer while creating this whole lifestyle brand.
Yeah.
Sun,
based on sun and the beach and boating and all that. It's the cruel touch of fate in many regards. I mean, I recall when I first heard that Neil Peart of the band Rush passed away. And how did he pass away? He passed away of brain cancer, which, if you know anything about the way he...
A cerebral guy.
Very cerebral guy, wrote very deep books and was an accomplished author as well. And very, very sort of out there lyrics. But at the same time, as a musician, it took everything he had to do what he did. Nobody else could ever repeat that, and yet he passes away of brain cancer, the same cancer that killed John McCain. It's just those cruel, touches of fate, which will all be there someday.
Yeah,
and who know what is in store with us. But if we can look back at our lives and if we can be remembered, certainly in the way that Jimmy's being remembered, for the most important things, being a dedicated husband, father, friend, which he was to so many, then our lives will be complete.
He's got a great song, "I Love the Now," and even very early in his career, he was singing about the importance of the moment and of life being the journey, and that he often alluded to the his own mortality, and that he was going to push everything he could into as much time as he had. And it's, the things that have been written is that ever since he knew that this was going on, he was not morose. There was no victim mentality. He wanted to pack as many shows as he could. One of his final major shows was at Snapdragon, the brand new Snapdragon Stadium in San Diego, and the very first concert they ever had there. And I noticed, as an old guy now, that there wasn't just children of parrot heads, there was grandchildren of parrot heads, and there was a whole new generation. He packed the place, and I tell you, his health was diminishing at that point, but his heart was exploding, and you could see it in his eyes. It was a huge, moving experience.
Yeah, and I mean, in that vein, I've been brainwashing my kids over the last week too. And there's a song called "Little Miss Magic" that I hadn't really even played or heard in a while, and a friend of mine kind of brought it to my attention that it was played. She and her father danced to it at her wedding, and I was like, "Oh, I gotta go back and listen to that." And I've been playing it for my daughter Campbell, and she loves it. And so it's just, that generational connection with that type of music is so strong.
Yeah. I took my daughter Skylar to her first show at 10 in Santa Barbara, and we were lucky enough to get on stage, and before the show, and she took some pictures with Mike Utley and Peter Mayer, and it was a she had started with Jimmy Buffett. There was a lullaby album. It was all instrumental, so I think she was sort of pre-programmed from the crib. But she was the first one to call me and say, "Hey, are you all right?" Because, and I had to say, well, not really. I was surprised to the extent that I was affected, and I think I mentioned to you, I got more texts than when my father died. I too was surprised how profoundly I had been affected by somebody. I remember when George Lucas was making American Graffiti, and he said we have this interesting thing in America. He had Wolfman Jack in that movie. It's like how we feel that we know these personalities that have touched us through their art and their music, and so he explored that with the DJ. And now, of course, with social media, it's almost as if we feel as if we know these people, and they touch us on this very base, deep, profound level.
Well, and tell us about, you've got a couple things happening related to your establishments with a documentary. Is that right?
Yeah. So, Jimmy liked tiki. I'm a big tiki guy, and so the idea that we could continue my chain of restaurants down here and explore that a little bit. So going back to the Polynesian pop era of the 50s, which was sort of the boomers, and so I'm very excited to be to building the first purist tiki bar that's been in Tucson, and since we have an old classic that was built 60 years ago.
Yeah.
But but it'll be attached to our other Buffett bar down here, which is called The Landing, and we're stone's throw from Phoenix with the new tiki place. It's in Oro Valley. But Jimmy's mark on my business partner and myself. My business partner happened to be in Key West on his boat when it happened, so he sailed in, and we got kind of firsthand correspondence, of the outpouring of people, and not just at Margaritaville, but Jimmy had a little studio there that a lot of other people record at called Shrimp Boat Sound. And it was just overnight the explosion of flowers and, heartfelt, cards and posters, and people, carved coconuts. I mean, just really, you got to see that he was a superstar that blazed his own trail. He created this genre that if you want to call it trop rock or yacht rock now, I mean, it didn't really exist before him.
Right.
And his legacy of the people that he touched and with his music will live on.
Yeah.
It always. Yeah. So, but thank you for taking the time to, dedicate a show to him, because it's it's healing. And it's helpful.
Yeah. Well, Doug, thank you again, Fini, for everything you're doing down there. We appreciate your insights.
Yeah, maybe the spirit will move you, and you'll be able to, someday, move up I-10 and build a landing right there on Indian School and 40th.
There you go. That'd be perfect.
Yeah. I would love it. Well, there was many great memories came out of Desert Sky Pavilion, and he actually has a version where he talks about Zippy's place up there, and when he would change the lyrics. And so it's anyway. Thanks again. Good luck with everything. Continue the good work.
Yeah.
And
thanks, brother.
Remember all the light that he brought into our lives, because I think that's what he would have wanted.
Absolutely.
All right, brother. Thank you. God bless you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
There's a little song that goes back to the old days that we weren't all crazy. We would go insane. I don't know where I came up with that. It must have been a lot of research one night. But now that I'm into vegetable juice. Just kidding. Just kidding. But there's little changes in latitudes, changes in attitude. You can sing along in this too. I mean, all of these things, This is, we passed out. You can follow the bouncing ball in front of the monitors and sing whatever lyrics you want. I saw somebody singing Whipping Post to that song. That's quite all right. I'm sure Greg wouldn't mind. I don't. Took off for a weekend last month, tried to recall the whole year, all of the faces and all of the places, wondering where they all disappeared. I didn't ponder the question too long. I was hungry and went out for a bite, ran into a chum with a bottle of rum, and we wound up drinking all night. It's these changes in latitudes, changes in attitude, nothing remains quite the same. With all of the hunting and all of our cunning, if we could laugh, we could all go insane. Reading departure signs in some big airport reminds me of the places I've been. Visions of good time that brought so much pleasure make me want to go back again. If it suddenly ended tomorrow, I could somehow adjust to the fall. Help me out now, here we go. Good times and riches and I'll see more than I can recall. With my changes in latitudes, changes in attitude, nothing remains quite the same. Through all of the islands and all of the highlands, if we could laugh, we would all go insane. Through what I'm bringing. Think about Paris when I'm high on red wine. Wish I could jump on a plane. So many nights I sit and dream of the ocean. I wish I was sailing